there's a bit of a trend that I'm seeing in Anaplan, and it starts off pretty small, 1 or 2 people, and then it seems to grow within the organization. So I think it's kind of an interesting trend that I'm starting to pick up here. But what we're seeing is, and Hugh here is from finance. A lot of finance people. The thing with finance is that it's never been this exciting to be in finance. There's so much change that's happening. The CEO role's changing. It's growing from a traditional, reducing costs, compliance, and all of that stuff. CFO role is now changing to more of a role that's now looking forward-looking, customer-focused. They're getting very tactical, very disruptive, not looking at the past anymore, but like kind of how are we going to change the future? So that's kind of changing in our finance function. The other thing that's kind of changing in our world is data. Data is apparently doubling every 2 years. So we have this exponential amount of data that we're trying to manage within our organization, finance being no exception to that. Another piece of information on data is that there was some research done by one of the big consulting companies, and they found that enterprises that have over 250 million, 28% of them have over 10 financial ERP systems. So not only is data growing, it's also extremely complex. The third thing that's happening is uncertainty. Uncertainty continues to increase. We continually see uncertainty and the change in the environment. So when we think about technology and how do we solve these things, how do we solve for this changing role in finance? How do we solve for this growing change in data, the growing in data and uncertainty? How do we make sure that we have tools that we're able to change and be able to get within the organization, solving real problems? And so coming back to the earlier comment about, we start small. I mean, at HPE, we've had kind of a lot of starts with Anaplan. They started in the quota organization. There was a lot of success there, but it didn't really get any further than that. We've now looked at it for FP&A. And let me just jump to the next slide. Oops, wrong way. So why Anaplan in HPE? So we've looked at it in FP&A. So the quota guys have gone off and done their thing, and they've been pretty successful. It's been well implemented, but they've never really got much further than that. Where we see in FP&A, we're struggling with a few things. We're struggling with divestitures. I don't know if anybody knows or been watching and tracking HP Enterprise for the last, or HP as a whole, changing to HP Enterprise and HP Inc., and then the spin-off. We have a massive challenge with divestitures. It was a huge company before, and now it's 4 smaller companies, all being sold off in different directions, all going off in different directions. Within the organization, we've had extreme challenges. We've had changes of process. We've had these processes that are built for a multinational company. Now we have a small company, but we still have big processes. Less people, big processes. That's a challenge. Within the organization, we're also seeing challenges of resource. IT, for example. IT have been, consumed with all of these divestitures and things like that. They have been focused on the divestiture, but also kind of fixing all of these systems now that we're also becoming a smaller company and things like that. They don't have the time to kind of help us with all of this uncertainty within FP&A. How do we change our planning models fast enough to keep pace with the changing environment? How do we develop models that are useful for our organization so that they're able to drive growth, they're able to understand where the risks are, understand where the opportunities are? So it's really about looking for technology and understanding the technology that's out there. Now, there's a couple of interesting pieces of information coming out of a survey. The FSN Future Finance Survey, they basically said that CFOs, 66% of them have too little time to do transformation. Now, we're forced to do transformation because we're changing, but still, the office of the CFO just don't have the time to do that. And that's probably why Jim was talking about, him being the only person in HR. Myself, we decided that we wanted to kind of look at the technology out there and see kind of what we could use. And I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to technology, and it has to work for me. When I started using Anaplan really focused on it probably December last year. So I'm pretty much a newbie here. But what we did is we went and we took three of our teams, one of our IT, who we consider the Center of Excellence, CEO, COE. And then we also looked at, we had one model builder and myself kind of like helping to manage this team. We basically locked ourselves in a room for a week, and we took Anaplan and we just figured it out. And the way that we figured it out, there's some great training, but you get through the training, it kind of gives you like a little bit of a broad understanding. But the way we figured it out is the support from Anaplan. But also, the great thing with them is that they give you a whole bunch of models. And the nice thing is you take them to pieces, and then you try and put them back together again with your data. And that we found was the best way to learn Anaplan. So we left. And the other thing is the community. That's something that's also a great thing. We met up with other people that were using Anaplan, asked them a whole bunch of questions, and we kind of within that week, we got to a stage where I would say we were about 60-70% proficient in Anaplan. Now, I thought we would be a lot further along the line. Anaplan is, as I guess most of you guys know, is slightly different to kind of your typical database. It has its challenges. But once you get like the basic concepts, I think it works pretty well. So the challenges we had were IT resources were pretty limited. So we had to go and find a tool that we could use without IT's labor-intensive support. Historically, if we had a challenge like this, we wanted to build something, we would go to IT, they would build a web-based solution, they would support it for the next 5 years, and we would continue to iterate. We don't have that luxury anymore. The other thing is we wanted to empower our FP&A organization. Now, who here in the finance organization, who here uses Excel? Anybody? Not, okay. Not as many as I thought. I thought everybody would put their hand up. Excel is the most powerful tool in FP&A finance because what does it do? It empowers the user. It makes the user, puts the user in control of whatever he has to do. He's not relying on an IT team to change a formula in Excel. He's not relying on a BI team to change a kind of a graphic for him. He has the control. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to find technology that we are able to use and give to our stakeholders, our FP&A organization, where they didn't have to rely on IT to change things. So we wanted to empower IT. We didn't have the luxury of the IT organization. And to be honest, we could have used Excel. Now, one of the biggest drawbacks in Excel that we found was collaboration. We've actually built quite an advanced Excel model, and we'll go through that in a minute. But what we really used the Excel model for was more to figure out what the process was that we wanted to fix. And that's one of the biggest challenges as well when implementing an Anaplan thing. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to build a solution that we could collaborate at speed. Because our process, when we're looking at cash flow forecasting, it's all about speed. How quickly can I get the information on cash flow performance to my stakeholders so that they can take corrective actions? Now, a lot of the time, within cash flow, it's quite difficult to take corrective actions. And a lot of the time, it's long-term things that they processes that they have to implement to impact cash flow. And we're talking mainly working capital and things like that. So these things take time. If you're waiting 4 weeks to get your results of where your cash flow lies, and we measure it on a monthly basis, and we need to get it even faster than that. But if we're trying to measure cash flow and trying to understand where our cash flow is going and it's going the wrong way, we need people to make changes quickly. So we needed a tool that could collaborate pretty quickly. So working with Anaplan, we've had, and we're still kind of in the development stage. We're in phase 1. We've got 3 phases. Phase 1 is kind of getting that initial feedback, getting that information collection, collaboration piece working. The second phase is more building the model, and the third phase is replacing the old architecture. But the idea of this is to kind of move the organization into something that, streamlining that whole process down to something that's pretty quick so we can get information to the users faster. So this is our vision. We wanted to build a world-class cash flow. We are in a very competitive environment, competition, Dell, a couple of other big players as well, and cash, obviously growth is pretty important when it comes to stakeholder equity. Profitability is pretty important, but one of the things that is becoming more important, especially in this industry, is cash and how we're generating cash. But not only that, how well we can predict cash. Because it's one of the most important things. If you know how much cash you're going to have, you can make decisions based on that. If you don't know where it's going to end up, it's going to be a very difficult discussions, on where to invest and how to invest if you don't understand where your cash is. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to make people accountable. So historically, cash flow had been a very centralized operation. Everything had been centralized within the corporate FP&A organization. There was one person that ran a model, collected information on the organization as a whole, ran a cash flow, and we knew where the cash flow is. That doesn't make people accountable. What it does is everybody rolls it up, and then we go, okay, we're missing. Who's responsible for our miss? It's difficult to kind of figure all of these things out. So part of the transformation process that we went through was actually taking that model and dispersing it within the organization, within the 50 or 60 stakeholders within the organization. We have different accounts. So we not only do working capital, we do the whole operating cash flow. That's kind of the focus. We don't do investing and financing. But we're really focused on making sure that we understand what our operational cash flows are, but also making people accountable. And to be able to make people accountable, you need to have a tool that enables them to collaborate. And what we want to be able to do, and this is again, we're just halfway through the development process, but what we wanted to be able to do is, give users the ability to forecast their cash flow, but forecast their balance sheet, but see the impact of their cash flow immediately. So they could then go and make corrective actions at the time they're entering it, as opposed to the 4 weeks afterwards, which is the current thing. So you can see critical success factors. The first one there, speed, focus, simplicity, and tenacity. But some of the guiding principles are kind of interesting, because one of the biggest things is, with the cash flow as well, is that we had teams that would go, okay, I've entered my cash flow, and then there would be, so cash flow is pretty simple for those that aren't finance. You take one quarter's or 1 month's balance sheet, you subtract the last month's balance sheet, and then you add a whole lot of adjustments on top of it. So the organization, the business organization, are responsible for forecasting the balance sheet. But sometimes they haven't got the visibility to the adjustments that are being added on top of them. Those can be non-cash items that are being adjusted in balance sheets. Those can be divestitures moving from an operational balance sheet to a investing or financing balance sheet cash flow. So within a balance sheet, one balance sheet item, the delta between them may fall in different parts of the cash flow, may have to be taken out for non-cash purposes. So there's a lot of adjustments. Those continue to be managed centrally. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to build a visibility throughout the organization where people could see who's entering adjustments, why they're entering adjustments, who is responsible for them. So that enables us the auditability, which was one of the ones that we added at a later stage at the bottom there, was one of the critical success factors to be able to be successful in this, because not only do we want to make people accountable, but we also want them to understand how their numbers end up in the final numbers as well. So Anaplan was a great solution to be able to provide this, in that we're able to kind of get all our data, we're able to add all our adjustments, and we're able to do this drill down where you can actually see from inception your balance sheet forecast all the way through to your adjustments to your final cash flow, how that is, who's responsible for it, and then go and look at those people and kind of question what their misses or their lack of accuracy and things like that, down to a lot more granular detail, and give people the ownership of that. Now, I'll be honest, cash flow forecasting or balance sheet forecasting is incrementally more complex than P&L forecasting, and P&L forecasting is still a major issue, and there's huge challenges. With balance sheet forecasting, you've got both in and out. And I was speaking to Meredith earlier, and she was talking about being responsible for legal. They might decide to settle a claim suddenly, and they spend $100 million suddenly one month. There's no way that you'd forecasted in that unless you had prior knowledge to that. So it's difficult. You can't use prior information. So what we've done now is we've started to build the visibility within the organization. This is what it used to look like, and this is a very generous representation. Basically, Excel spreadsheets, everybody, and what had happened is because it had gone from one model in corporate to each one of the business groups having their own model, they just replicated the same model, same complexity several times. So what we did is we had people entering data in lots of different Excel workbooks, lots of different places, hard coding stuff, changing formulas, et cetera, and it just became unmanageable. What we've built now is a more streamlined system in the fact that there is only one place now for people to enter their adjustments. So what we've done is we've taken the complexity of the data, we've simplified that down into a single database. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about loading data directly into Anaplan. We're still kind of at a very early stage, so that might be something that happens down the road. But we have in cash flow forecasting, we have a challenge in that our master data, we don't have a cash flow master data structure or hierarchy. We spent a good 3 months trying to figure out what that is because of the complexity of the organization. So we actually do a lot of the data processing external to that. We load that data. Now, these processes are all automated, so there's no human intervention in that. That gets loaded into Anaplan. The users then go and forecast their balance sheet. Those are the business units. The corporate guys go and put their adjustments in. Everybody has visibility to that. We have all the cash flow forecast planning inside of Anaplan. But what we want to do is we're also building an integrated system. Now, I heard Jim earlier talking about building an integrated planning system. We're starting with an integrated reporting system. We want to take balance sheet, cash flow planning, we want to put it up against other stuff. We want to understand kind of where our cash is going. We want to understand where our sales are going, and we want to understand that all in one piece. So the plan for us is also, and this is kind of like a phase 3 piece of it, is to push that back into our data lake so that we can put it against a lot of other information and kind of build a full dashboard. So we're still working on that. Like I said, we started in December, so we're still very early days. But we've made significant progress. We've gone through several rounds of UAT, and we've had a lot of success on that. I talk a bit about the methodology we've been using. So we're a small group, and we're expanding now. But the methodologies are kind of like, let's build something quickly, sell it to the organization, get them to understand what the value is, because this is one of the most critical pieces of any transformation, is understanding what the value is. The next one is then build out a working model that actually, work with IT and building out of that, and then kind of building a scalable solution. So this is pretty much what we did in this development. The rapid prototyping was all done in Excel. We used Power Pivot, Power Query, Power BI as kind of like the back end to the Excel. I don't know if most you guys are familiar with that, but it's all data model driven. So that meant that we understood the data structures, we understood the hierarchies, we understood how all this data interacts. We also used that model to validate the data. So the great news is when we started working on Anaplan, all our data of hierarchies had been validated, all our data quality had been validated, and then all how that data interacted with each other, because there's when you think of adjustments, we actually have 3 different types. We have adjustments that affect balances, we have adjustments that impact cash flow only, and then we have allocation adjustments, which are layered on top of that. And each 3 of those are treated separately. So we had to understand how that data interacted across a data model. We've now been putting it into Anaplan. So the nice thing with Anaplan is the copy and paste from Excel. The old models are still being used, and we kind of using them in parallel, but the guys can just copy and paste directly. We built a sheet that replicates our data entry sheet in Excel to Anaplan. We just copy and paste it into there, so they can use the two models side by side. But what they're getting in Anaplan is now the collaboration, the drill down, which they haven't been able to have in Excel. And then the final product is kind of that more scale product, integrating into the data lake, etc. Value, whenever you're doing transformation, always start with value. This is kind of based on time. FP&A value is very difficult to measure. I think the biggest value, and this is kind of missing out of here, and I left it out, but the biggest value that we're getting is reducing the cycle time down to get a faster information to the users so that they can make decisions quickly. They can influence their business to kind of make changes, to take corrective action. This is more kind of like measuring hours and costs and things like that. This is also useful. We have an organization that currently is overworked. We have had multiple divestitures, multiple acquisitions. So every time one of those happens, the model changes slightly. So it becomes extremely complex. These people are overworked, and it comes down to the fact that it's 90% data and information and 10% analytics. We want to shift that with Anaplan to 10% data and information and 90% analytics. And these numbers are all telling us. So Q1 we've just finished. We've saved a whole bunch of hours. The first phase again was in Excel, really building out that data model, getting the sourcing, the mapping, the validation, all of those things out of the way before we even started with Anaplan, and then really driving some of the allocation logic and things, kind of the more advanced stuff in the Anaplan. The next phase, where we're talking about scenario analysis and things like that, is where we actually fill out the forms for them based on a lot of the calculations that they're already doing. What have we learned? I think, over the space of a very short period of time, we've become reasonably adept at that at Anaplan. We didn't start with consultants. I know that there was a question in the earlier session as well. We did rely heavily on the Anaplan support team. So we had set up a section of hours, and we just use them kind of when we need them, and pull them in, get them to kind of give us best practices, give us direction. We'll build something, we'll give it to them, they have a look at it, and they test it. So there's a great interaction there. The other thing that we've learned is always start small. We've taken a process that's pretty isolated from the rest of the process. Cash flow is pretty much separated. It's a containable process because there's probably about 50 users. We still use most of the ledger, so there's a lot of dimensions and things like that. So it's pretty big still, but at least from a user point of view, it's still manageable. That gave us the experience and also the understanding of how Anaplan works, because it's often not as intuitive as you would think. The one thing, who here is obsessed by cell count? I mean, if you're developing in Anaplan, I have nightmares about cell count and how easy it is to break the model. So that's one of the things that when you're building in a database solution, you're not too worried about the size of the model, and you make one change in Anaplan, and suddenly you're on 10 trillion cells, and it's like, okay, that doesn't work. So there's a lot of thinking about architecture on a continuous basis on how you develop stuff. And you'll see, like when we've developed stuff, and then we've gone, okay, that works better. But it takes a long time to go back and rechange everything in the back end as well. But the nice thing is it's a very agile solution. And the last one is kind of the user interface. I think the guy from Google was saying that, don't underestimate how much time you spend on user acceptance or user experience. Getting that user experience right. My recommendation on kind of the development that we're doing is we get the users on day one, and we kind of work with them. And I think we've probably on our third or fourth complete iteration of the user experience, and we've got it down now to one page. We use the subset function, which is great, so they can flip between different sets of data in their actuals, but their input is pretty much static, so it kind of they can see what comparisons they want. So I've gone over 1 minute.